Well, Morena, good morning, everybody. Welcome to our council meeting for the 30th of April. This year is whizzing past, but before we address and attack our agenda, I shall invite Gary to open with a karakia.
Thank you, Bishop. Ena mana, ena raurangatira mā tēnā koutou katoa. E te atua kaharawa, o mai kia mātua te kaha. Ki te whai atu i ngā huarahi tika, mo tēnei hui I tēnei rā, tihei Māori ora. Give us the strength to follow the correct pathway for our meeting today. Blessing be to life.
Fabulous, agreed. Wonderful. So moving on, thank you very much, Gary. You all have your agendas in front of you. Just a couple of quick opening comments from me. It's been a crazy old month, I have to confess. Haven't really had a chance to take stock of what we've had to contend with. But look, as a quick whistle through my diary, I see that in the last month, a number of us attended a citizenship ceremony in Cambridge, another just on 100, I think, new citizens. We also commemorated the 160th year of Ōrākau battle, which was a very significant event, obviously on the outskirts of Te Awamutu here. Very timely reminder of what has happened in this district in a historical sense. We've also collectively embarked and completed our enhanced annual plan targeted roadshow of sorts, seeking engagement around our annual plan. Liz and I had the great pleasure of farewelling some of New Zealand Olympic rowers down at Karapiro. I have to say, take my hat off to some of those sort of superhuman residents in our community who push themselves beyond normal limits, and wish them all well, particularly taken with the mum's boat. They're a pair of rowers who are both recent parents, so I just absolutely applaud their tenacity and strength to get back up into high performing sport with toddlers in tow. Also attended the opening, if you like, of the Cambridge Resthaven building. What a great event and occasion that was. Long in the making and wonderful to see what can be done to care for residents through a collaborative and long-term commitment by good meaning people in the community. And also recently, of course, all of us would have attended some way, shape or form, except for Mr. Pettit potentially, an Anzac Day commemoration of sorts, whether it was a dawn parade or one of the civic services that were held around our Whare Rohi. So look, it's just been an action-packed month for us all, I'm sure. That was just a whistle-stop tour of some of the things that I've done and been to, and obviously attended with you all. So in the background of that, of course, council business tunes on, and there are other live issues, but we won't get into that now. Let's rip into our agenda. First item, obviously, apologies. I have two apologies, one from Councillor Morgan, who is absent for personal reasons, and Councillor Andrew Brown for illness. So yes, he was unwell, not COVID, he assures me, but just feeling like junk. So I said, stay home. We don't need you and your junk here. So Lou is going to move that for me, and Mike Pettit will second that. I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Fantastic. Moving on to our next item then, which is disclosure of members' interests. Are there any at this point that anybody wishes to declare? I'm not aware of there being anything particularly controversial in terms of people's interests. No, excellent. Next item then, late items. Again, I'm not aware of there being any late items, so we shall skip past that matter. Confirmation of the order of the meeting. I don't believe there are any changes required. Claire, you're happy to move that for me, and I will second that from the chair. I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. So that moves us on to our confirmation of the minutes appearing at page 9 of our agenda. I believe they are true and correct. There is a recommendation there on page 9. Claire will move that for me. Do I have a seconder? Mike Pettit, I almost called you Michael again. Will second that. I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Great. Right, on to our first substantial item, which is Anchor Institutions, a paper there appearing on page 15 and onwards, and I shall pass that over to Kirsty and Gary, the two of you. Who's leading this? Gary, take it away.
Well, I'll do a starter for 10 and Kirsty might want to add a few comments, but we'll take the paper as read if that's okay. I'll just direct your attention to page 36 of the agenda where we show a pinwheel there of the key facets of this model and focusing in initially on the community collaboration. And that's well grounded in the spatial plan that we've been preparing over the last 3 or 4 years, Ahuaki. So all of this work stems from the community outcomes that we've agreed with the community through that process. And we'll look to cement in the completion of that plan by end of September.
It's through you, Madam Chair, it's another item on this agenda where we're seeking approval as to the programme of work.
Yes. So at the end of the day, all of this work is grounded in Ahuaki. And so why do we do Ahuaki? You know, critically, if you look at the planning landscape for local government, it's very messy. And so when we think about the resource management space, where we do a lot of our planning, it's a really cumbersome process. It starts with national policy statements and then goes to regional policy statements, regional plans, district plans, and all of that stuff has to be consistent with each other. But unfortunately, most of it goes through a Schedule 1 process, which costs a lot of money and takes a lot of time. And it's really hard to control that policy process. And then, of course, you start to move to the land transport legislation where you've got the National Land Transport Plan, you've got the Regional Land Transport Plan, and then you've got our own sort of activity management plans. And again, none of that's particularly well aligned with our resource allocation tool, which comes through the Local Government Act. And critically, to give effect to a lot of the things we want to do in our own sort of transport plan, we have to rely on the designation process in the Resource Management Act. And again, that's a very cumbersome process. And then finally, you come to that resource allocation tool, which is the Local Government Act. And in many respects, it's a great piece of legislation, but critically, it's not aligned with central government outcomes, regional council outcomes, and indeed our own outcomes aren't aligned with those other two. So these are all very cumbersome planning processes, and they really tend to push the community at arm's length. And you'll get a sense of that when we produce, you know, a long-term plan. By way of example, when we put out a statement of proposal with a bunch of community initiatives in there, and ultimately, you know, we might get 1,000 submissions, and we hear people on a I guess a conveyor belt of submissions, everyone getting 5 or 10 minutes to submit. And 2 months later, they'll get a response with a paragraph about what we've done in relation to their submission. So no wonder people are feeling disenfranchised by this process, which is quite cumbersome and very inflexible. And particularly for the governors of our district, you folk, when you get elected, when you've got aspirations and dreams for the community, we're only just now, all things being equal, we would only just now be adopting an LTP, and you've only got a year left in your term. And so Ahuaki, this community plan, is all about, enjoying the ride without having to go through these really cumbersome special consultative processes and agree the outcomes for the community. Now, that's something that we've actually enjoyed the journey, because we've actually started to unpick this issue around what does participatory democracy look like? How can we get closer to our communities? And the next iteration of that was participatory budgeting. So when we understand what our community wants, you think about maybe moving all of our community grants into the participatory budgeting space and actually working with those communities to deliver, by way of example, the outcomes identified in Ahuaki. So it's a new way of doing things, and a lot of it is born out of the work we did with the Future of Local Government panel. We talked about anchor institutions and how we could use this really enabling piece of legislation, which is the Local Government Act, better, but without having to subscribe to all those really cumbersome processes that are there. And then effectively, all the stuff we do in the RMA, and particularly the Local Government Act, just becomes an implementation mechanism, because we know what our community wants and we know how to work more closely with them. Now, that might beget a change in thinking to the governance arrangements for this council. How might we work better with the community in the future? And so what's going to drop out of this work that we're doing is a work program, but something for you to think about. How might we get more closely aligned with our communities? How might we use our community boards or not to do that? So quite an exciting journey. So the other key piece of work I just wanted to talk about, and because a lot of this isn't new to you, is the way in which we spend our money. And so when we think about the amount of rates that we coercively take from ratepayers to spend for the benefit of our assets in the community, that's something like $100 million in rates. And annually our spend at around 200 million also relies on lots of other external fundraising. So because we've inevitably focused on least cost service delivery, which has been the mandate in the legislation, often that means that the big guys win the contracts. Often our money's going outside of the district and sometimes overseas. And so just thinking about how we can get this economy working in a more circular fashion, keeping the money in Waipa, and also thinking about the way in which we deliver our services. And so we've rewritten the criteria, which you've seen for section 17A, and thinking about when we might contract something out. The preference then is to use local, and when we can't do that, we then think about, well, should we actually deliver that service in-house? And so when you think about our service delivery at the moment, if someone had an issue with, say, graffiti on a toilet in Parongia, they'll get referred to the graffiti contractor. Or if it's a toilet cleaning issue, it'll be the toilet cleaning contractor. Or if it's a bin emptying issue, it'll be a bunch of different contractors. And so there's a thought that maybe we need to shift that on its head and think about having people who have a sense and a care for that place, and maybe who are employed by council and not contractors. And if you do a scan over our contracts, I think we have something like 400 contracts. If they were all to run their term, that's $250 million spend over the term of those contracts. And so it's really a case of when those contracts come up for review, having a very close look at the way in which we deliver those services through that 17A lens that we've crafted. So this isn't about a more costly way of doing things. This is just about delivering better outcomes for your communities. And so that's the nexus for this model. Kirsty, you might want to comment about some of the things you learned at ICMA and connections with the community, that community assets and infrastructure one. You gave the council a pretty good example of that a little bit earlier in the meeting.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. If I can just maybe, I guess, step back a little bit and just reiterate what Gary's already said, that this is all about ensuring we successfully deliver on our vision and our community outcomes to enhance well-being of our Waipa communities. So Ahuaki absolutely provides that high-level strategic direction, and this is about how we go about doing things, about doing the right things right, about ensuring that we are operating in a way that's effective and efficient. Acknowledging that our environment is not static. So whilst we're seeking approval of the framework today, acknowledge also that the detail that sits below that in terms of the descriptors, in terms of the work program that is well under development, those things need to be responsive to our external environment, and we need to ensure that we can change as required. So look, just in terms of that work program, we're anticipating that we will bring that to you at the end of June for approval. We have progressed quite a substantive draft, and just want to acknowledge the input from Joy, our Economic Development Advisor, in that regard. But we are now working with subject matter experts across the organisation in those areas that are depicted within these component parts of the framework. So procurement, comms and engagement, community services, property. We'll be reaching out to those staff to seek input and refinement before that's then presented to you for approval. As Gary mentioned, and I've talked about with you previously, the ICMA conference was an incredible opportunity on a scale unlike anything that we have on offer here in New Zealand, and the exposure to how things can be done differently and connecting with people at place was something that was prevalent through the sessions that I attended. There were some standouts, and I've shared with you the Northern Ireland Council, Antrim and Newton Abbey Council, that is award-winning, has significant responses in terms of its community engagement and what it's doing in terms of its community wellbeing program, and in partnering with local businesses to grow their local economy are significant. I've shared with you the council that provides for a learning program for engaging with the community, and there are models relating to participatory budgeting. So that's all encompassed within this framework, and something that we're hoping to then further develop and grow through the draft work program, which will be a 3-year program. And obviously it will continue to be refined and enhanced through that phasing. As part of that also, you have identified the need for us to be clear about the benefits realised, and identifying those, measuring them and reporting back to you. So there is work well underway through that draft work program, so that we can ensure alignment also with our community outcomes. So looking at what, if any, refinements might need to be made as we then commence the development of the 25-34 long-term plan, so that we can ensure that consistency and alignment. Yeah, that's probably all from me. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary and Kirsty. Any conversations? I've got things I would like to say, but I just open the floor. Sorry, excuse me, Claire.
Yes, thanks, Gary and Kirsty. Yeah, I'm pretty excited about the prospects of, like what could come out of an anchor institutional approach. Yeah, so I'm really pleased to see this work being done. Just a couple of comments. I did have a look at some of the resources, and I thought the Manchester one, that's the Centre for Local Economic Strategies, had some really good stuff, especially about demonstrating that, they spent X amount of dollars, from suppliers, and the top 300, this is the proportion that are local suppliers. This is the proportion that's small and medium-sized enterprises, that kind of thing. And this is the re-spend of those suppliers in the local economy as well. So yeah, I'd love to see that kind of approach adopted. Talking about sort of communities having a bigger say in that, I'd really like part of that to have a look at Pirongia, because at the moment they don't have a community board, and we have the Pirongia Ward Committee that kind of looks after those smaller communities, on the western side of the district. But I have had some quite challenging conversations with the locals there, feeling a bit disenfranchised about influencing, the investment that council does in the district. And someone said, why don't they have their own community board? Like it's a sort of a step up from where they are now. Or even a representative on the Tuamutu Community Board or something, a bit like, the Kakapuku one, I don't know. Because, I do feel that they would like a bigger say in what is spent in that community. And it's not quite just grants, it's more like council, council stuff. Yeah, but so I'm just putting that on the table really, that, it'd be good if that could be looked at as part of it. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Claire. Lou.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. I'm very, very supportive of this. We already have this in operation with Civil Defence, where our council actually does act as an anchor institution for Otahuanga and Waitomo. And we work collectively together. And in the current environment that we're working with, we will see that this is something that we can progress, I believe, through the whole of that, whole of our infrastructures, where we can develop liaisons with councils near to us or adjacent to us, and purchasing and employing and enhancing our local business resilience. One of the things that came out of the Mike Bush report over in Hawke's Bay was the fact that all of the institutions were rather siloed. They tended not to communicate with each other. And this is something that we can actually break that down, and to the benefit of, as I say, for our whole community. So I really have a lot of support for the whole of this enterprise, and feel that it's a thing that we need to progress as we can afford it and move forward.
Thanks, Lou. Roger, and then Liz.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. I'm also very much in favour of this, and particularly the enhanced community participatory process. I think we saw the value of that very much through the Ahuaki process. The part of the initial progress on this is looking at our procurement processes. And I take from reading this that perhaps the emphasis may not be on the lowest cost factor, but that the value to the well-beings within the community is going to be more of, or maybe an equal measure, if not more of a measure. And there is a chance that, in fact, that could be an increased cost to our community to achieve those well-beings. So I've noticed in the significance and engagement clause within this paper that you have stated that because of the community participation through Ahuaki has actually signalled that this would be a positive move. And yet, my question is, do we not need to go back to the community with the concept, even if it gets from them a really positive response? It's kind of starting off and saying, well, we believe in community participation. Let's go back to them to start with to get their endorsement of the change in culture in this organisation. So I just question that. I believe that we maybe should be going out to the community to get the endorsement of this move for Waipa.
Kirsty.
Through you, Madam Chair, I think through the previous workshop sessions, we've highlighted that this isn't starting with a blank canvas. This is actually growing and enhancing a lot of what we're already doing and perhaps delivering some of it in a different way. So yes, Ahuaki, the Future for Local Government review signalled this. It's not something new internationally. It's something that is happening in other parts of the world. Future for Local Government review signalled the role of councils within their communities as anchors. This is really about bringing it together under a single framework. Ahuaki also, as is mentioned in the report, really provided the platform to be able to further explore and grow this concept. I think what we've highlighted in the report is that we don't believe there's a requirement for us or a trigger for us to go out and engage with the community on whether we develop a framework. It's really pulling together a lot of what we already know, what is already well underway, but signalling that there may well be times that we need to engage with the community through future engagement processes. So look, there's another item on the agenda about Ahuaki and the suggested next step, the role that might play as pre-engagement on the long-term plan. There are future opportunities to engage with the community. We've spoken about the possibility of community participatory processes through budget allocation. We're exploring what might or might not be possible through the development of the next long-term plan. So again, there are opportunities through these processes.
Remember also that I said that particularly RMA and Local Government Act then become implementation mechanisms, and so you get to test the veracity of your arguments, the acceptability to the public as you go through those special consultative processes under those pieces of legislation, because that's where the resources are cut. So you still need to go through an LTP or a process, Schedule 1 process under the Resource Management Act to deliver some of this stuff. It's just you've got a very clear direction from the community before you launch that process. I guess the RMA particularly and the Local Government Act is where you get the community get to make those trade-offs you were talking about. So if it means spending your money locally and that might deliver some different outcomes but cost a little bit more, that's something you test with the community through that process.
Thanks, Kirsty and Gary. Liz.
Yeah, no, I'm just processing a lot of what you just said, Gary, because I think there will be a lot of pinch points along the way where we can ensure that what we're progressing towards is the right thing. I don't think there's going to be a blanket, okay, approach at all, where we're picking and choosing what's appropriate for our communities as we embark on this journey. So that is, I guess, one point. But I take Roger's point, I guess, signalling this change, I think, is important. But I think, Kirsty, I heard you say that we will be enforcing that change through a lot of different ways that we would normally communicate. And we've got our LTP coming up, but I think in our messaging to our own communities, each of us in our own spaces, we can reflect the change that we're going to start to see as contracts come up for renewal. There's lots of processes as well that the community can join in to express their opinion as well. So I'm really comfortable with that because there are so many different contracts and some are appropriate and some just simply won't be. So it's really hard to engage our community as a whole, asking them for their opinion when we'd have to cite so many different examples. I think it would confuse our community in some spaces as well. But overall, I think we're heading in the right direction. To be honest, I look at this and thinking, this is council 40 years ago, 50 years ago. This is probably how a lot of the stuff we were doing, and we're sort of coming back around and and just going back to some of the old ways in a sense, but with a different lens and probably following a more strategic approach. So, Claire, I just wanted to comment on your thought around Pidongia. Agree with you. As our communities get larger, we have to think about what their voice is. I hear the same from Karapedo Village. Yeah, and probably from Ohopo as well. So how we might engage those, the communities that have a sense of community, that's the trick, isn't it? So I think we do need some thought into that. Perhaps that has to be driven from within the communities and we need to hear their voice. There are always leaders in those communities. We need to hear from them and probably through our processes as well. And then we can hopefully try and create something that would suit as well. Look, so I'm really happy with the paper. I think the thinking behind is pretty brilliant, actually. I think this will be something that a lot of other councils will probably eventually follow suit as well. So for me, this is really leading, nationally, local government across the country. So happy to move as well.
Thanks, Liz. Monty.
Right. There are parts of this that are really resonating with me, and the specific examples you have given today all do, but there are still parts of this that aren't. And I read this report really, really carefully for a second time yesterday to try and analyse what wasn't working for me. And I think it's this, and I'm going to share it with you as a bit of a challenge. You can, in this, the theoretical, or the theory behind the framework, the underpinning theory, I just can keep feeling the fact that this has come from post-industrialised, deindustrialised sort of urban decline. That's kind of what it feels like. And it's councils responding to that and stepping into this space, okay? And it just keeps coming through. And I keep going, yeah, but that's not us, that's not us. And I think that's why it's not resonating for me. So I think that a lot of the way forward you're suggesting, a lot of the actions and so on, I completely agree with, but I would challenge you to sort of redescribe, reimagine the theoretical underpinnings to get rid of that we're a industrial wasteland town in the States somewhere, and I'll tell you why, because that feels to me like a council's got these glowing embers that it's gently trying to blow to try and re-establish something. I don't feel like Waipa's like that at all. I feel like it's this wildfire that's barely in control, and how well we shape that will determine how good this place is at 30 or 50 years from now, okay? So, they're different starting points, and it reflects a different theoretical underpinning. So my challenge is, if the sort of the narrative behind what an anchor institution is was different, I think it would resonate with me, because I'm not actually objecting to any of the things you're suggesting. I think, yeah, great, great, great. But it just doesn't ring true for me at the moment, the theoretical underpinnings. And I'm the sort of person that I really, really like to understand the theoretical underpinnings and to identify with them the whole way through to the resulting actions. So it's a bit of a challenge there. I don't know, maybe I'm the only person around the table feeling this, but I've read it multiple times and you've socialised it with us 3 times. I've kind of said the same thing each time, but this time I've been more specific in my analysis of why it's not working for me. And I think it's a particular examples that the genesis of this is it just doesn't feel like Waipa to me. It's me.
Some really good observations there, Monty. Gary's happy to enlighten you in terms of some of those questions.
I like your analogy with glowing embers, and I think that's exactly where we're at. And when I reflected on the state of local government, and particularly as the 4 wellbeings brought back into the Local Government Act, and you think, well, how do we give effect to that? What's the plan? And the difficulty with our planning processes is that they are so encumbered by central government legislation and jumping through hoops and having a disempowered governance table because you have to be governors of that process. It makes it very difficult to understand what is the strategic direction of Waipa. Because when you think about LTPs, it's governed by asset management plans and audit and financial strategies and development contribution policies. And there's a whole bunch of different things that we have to line up. You just almost lose sight of what is it quintessentially that you want to deliver by way of community outcomes for your community. And I think the legislation that we operate under gets in the way of that. And so to breathe life into the governance of the district and your control and your connections with your community, I think we needed to try and cut through all of those statutory processes. So that's the genesis of the thinking here. And, for me, I'm sort of quite disappointed that because we are so process heavy, it puts way too much power in the hands of the chief executive because we manage the process. And it almost feels like you folk are in shackles to some extent because actually, no, you can't deliver that. You've got to go through an LTP process. Well, actually, I'd rather just get closer or help you folks get closer to your community, understand the outcomes your community want, not just RMA type outcomes, which are very heavily environmentally centric. And when you think about the government's latest policy on fast track consenting, that's very economic centric. What are you doing for the other well-beings that we're thinking about? And those are the things that are coming through Ahuaki. And then you can start to think about, okay, when we have the conversation about social, economic, cultural, and environmental well-beings, how do we deliver those? What sort of trade-offs are you ready to make? You do that through your LTP process. So it's more about the burning ember for me, or smouldering ember for me, Mike, was more about how difficult it is to manage this place or to govern this place without a tool like Ahuaki and anchor institutions.
Did you want to respond to that at all, Monty?
Look, we're basically on the same page, I think. I'm not disagreeing with anything either of you are saying. I just think this idea would be an easier sell if it was crafted in a more bespoke Waipa sort of context. That's all. That's probably what I'm getting at. Okay, it'd be easier to understand, it'd be easier to sort of to sell.
Thanks. Did you want to comment to that point, Claire?
Yes, I thought there were really good points that you raised, Monty. And I can see why you, I suppose, come to that conclusion. I felt that it was possible to have a look at Waipa's, I suppose, the context that we're in right now and how those overseas examples, why they may well be from, disindustrialization and sort of stagnating economies, but why there were gems in there that could actually really address some of the issues that we're faced with now, which I feel are, not so much economic as such as community cohesion, and as Gary's pointed out, this disconnect, this alienation that we are seeing that our community has with the role of council and what we're doing. Yeah, and so, yeah, I do see it as a way to, I suppose, emphasise the community-centric role that council has. And by emphasising that, we can address some of the other issues that our communities are feeling about our identity and probably a feeling of lack of control because, we've had all these pressures from central government and outside, big things like COVID that have really disrupted, I suppose, the sort of the smooth fabric of our lives. And in a way, this is a way to bring those threads together and a really, I suppose, very user-friendly and not confrontational, but it's a way to achieve, I think, greater well-beings in that. So, so I didn't have a problem with those examples, I suppose, that were addressing different social and economic issues, because I've felt for a long time that these I suppose the things that we're struggling with our community, in a sense of identity and placemaking is another one, but also participation. That this is a good way to address those, and maybe that should be emphasised more in the material.
Thanks, Claire. Lots of poetic references today, fanning of glowing embers and wildfires and smoothing fabric. It's like we've all sort of swallowed a pocket dictionary of poetry or something. So anyway, Roger and then Liz, and then I think we'll pull it this item.
Thank you very much. Some really interesting words in the last two presentations, and I take Claire's word of community alienation, and there is that out there, and I take Gary's point about determining what the community wants, and more importantly, how can an anchor institution deliver on that. And I just take a little quote from what is in this presentation. Next, Waipa has built up a strong capability and community trust in its approach to working with its communities. I'd suggest that perhaps some of what has happened over the last month has actually dented that trust, and that's why I feel the need to involve the community right from the beginning in terms of what this change in culture means, because I think that a lot of what is in here will truly resonate with the community, particularly the participatory involvement of the individual community. So I really take your point that we'll be touching base with them progressively. We've got the LTP next year, which will be a real opportunity, I think, to garner that community participation. Thanks.
Roger, Liz.
Yeah, look, just finally, I really take Monty, your points, and Roger, your points as well. And I think perhaps a way forward is that, look, this paper that's in front of us kind of doesn't describe Waipa and its examples. So to bring this to our community, or when we do bring this to our community, if we can have a new, more positive explanation probably of why we're going down this road that's more Waipa-centric. So I think this paper is really for us to understand the, kind of what has happened worldwide. But our explanation to our community should not be this paper. So it's probably, now that we've got to this point, it's how we move forward. It just needs a bit of a different description, I think.
So through you, Madam Chair, we can certainly work with comms and engagement on that. I think, Gary's talked at length about Ahuaki and the role that it plays. It's a non-statutory document. Why did we develop it? Was to build connections with our communities. Through that engagement, through the World Cafe approach, through our engagement with Mana Whenua and iwi, we've had significant feedback that has informed this. We need to be able to tell the story, acknowledge that that's not here. This is a council report presenting a framework. It doesn't have the comms lens, and I can work with Lisa to shape that up. And we get another opportunity to reconnect with our community through Ahuaki when we go through the special consultative procedure, linking back to those, to those communities that we visited and that we heard from in terms of their aspirations and how they want to further engage with council. Thank you.
Thanks, Kirsty. Look, just before we wind up this matter, I guess I just wanted to just reiterate Gary's sort of explanation for how he sees that this as being the next sort of evolution of local government. Something that Gary will regularly say to me is, we're stuck in this legislative straitjacket, and that really is what our daily grind is here, right? It's off one treadmill and onto the next, and in doing so, at times can run the risk of losing sight of why we're actually here. So it's really interesting to be able to challenge that legislative straitjacket that hampers us. So and question how can we better deliver those four wellbeings. I guess the obvious next question for me, and you sort of foreshadowed it a little there, Gary, is our governance model actually fit for purpose? And, we currently have a 35-year-old governance model. And the question I think is we have to be brave and honest about whether this is actually an effective model at all levels, and be brave enough, I guess, to challenge and question, have conversations around how we can go about being a bit more self-determining, bearing in mind some of the recommendations that came out of the Future for Local Government review. And actually make decisions about how we design our governance systems to deliver better outcomes for our residents and ratepayers, rather than just lumbering on necessarily with a 35-year-old model. So anyway, I just wanted to foreshadow that potential conversation. And yeah, definitely, Liz, Waipa-centric illustration 100% needs to be what we can show to our communities is what would this look like in action in Waipa. Totally understand that, moving from the theoretical, philosophical kind of bit to actually what does this look like in action on the ground in here. So yeah, lots of great stuff there. I have a mover in Liz. I'm happy to Lou would second that. You'll second that for me. I'll put the motion that we receive the report as appearing on that recommendation. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Thanks so much, Kirsty, for all your work, and Gary. It's great to see it coming to fruition in greater detail. So, next item in our agenda here is the Waipa District Council submission on the proposed 2434 Waikato Regional Council LTP. What a mouthful that one was. Morning, David. Nice to see you.
Morning, Madam Chair, councillors, and now moving from the lofty to a matter of detail. Your daily straitjacket grind. So the purpose of this report is simply to ask for your approval of a submission we've prepared on behalf of you. This draft was circulated a week ago for your comment, and apologies for dropping that on you on Friday evening. Not my preference, but anyway, we had to do it given the time constraints. The main point in that report covered by our submission and why we did a submission was really regarding the way the Regional Council funds public transport. Currently, there's a complex way in which it does that, and it's looking to unify a single system across the region. And we're basically calling for support for that. And then there's a couple of options in terms of how funding public transport is done. And we've, in the submission, opted for option one. And the reason for that is it does it allocates cost across the region, 80% to those within 5 kilometres of a bus route, a metro area, and 20% to more rural. You may argue, why even contribute if you're rural and you don't benefit from services? And the argument the regional council put back is basically the reduction in traffic on our roads through better bus transport benefits everyone. The other point we make in the submission is just questioning the way the rates are raised in terms of capital value of property, and ask the regional council to please review that, given how that falls disproportionately on farmers. And that's it, unless you've got any questions. There are 2 minor points about golden clams, just noting that work, primary industries trialling ways of control, and hornwort spraying, requesting that they continue to do it, that it's more than a recreational matter. Thank you.
No, really pleased to see those 2 inclusions in terms of the golden clams and hornwort. Obviously, Liz regularly talks all things hornwort. So perhaps, Liz, I'll pass it over to you then to address that, and then you.
Just on the hornwort, and look, absolutely appreciate this being in here. I was in a meeting with LINZ yesterday with Bridget, actually here from council. LINZ are in a tricky position. They are going to be halving the number of hectares on the water that they have the ability to fund going forward. So this is even more crucial now than ever.
Yeah, that's concerning, given the impact that could have on the usability and the things that flow on in terms of Karapiro usage. Thanks, Liz. Roger.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. I've already talked to you about this restructuring of the costing of PT, and I really support this. I wonder if you've had any opportunity to perhaps look at the model as it applies to our Waipa residents currently. Our public transport is 50% regional council, 25% Hamilton City, 25% Waipa. With the cost being structured to those within 5 k's of the route, what implication does that have to the allocation of the cost of that service to the individual regional or local authorities that route passes through?
I'm not sure I follow your question. Sorry. Through you, Madam Chair.
I wonder if I can put it a different way. Currently, we pay 25% of the cost. With this new regime, where it's within 5 k's of the areas that it travels through, the current service will go through parts of Waipa, parts of Hamilton City. How will that be reflected in the cost allocation of that service to the ratepayer? Is that?
A good question, and I think the honest answer I can give you is I have no idea in terms of how it's going to play out. And I would think probably the best approach is let's monitor, and it's something we might need to review in terms of just how that plays out, whether we get equity, because that's really the point of the submission, is it's looking for an equitable approach to how it is funded. And I think what's being proposed in option 1 appears to be, on the face of it, a more fair approach than we currently have.
Thanks, David. Lou.
If you read the submission, it actually just states a little bit about that. And what it actually says is that if this option is progressed, council will appreciate the understanding, the investments required, and the extent of the new metro area and any implications for council and its residents. It is understood that this detailed work will be completed prior to the proposed implementation from year 2, 2005. So this is work in progress, as I understand that.
Yeah.
So we do not have figures to actually work from now.
Yeah, just that my perception there, a little bit, is that if you look at the route, then that vehicle that's on that route will be travelling through a far greater part of Hamilton City than the comparative travel through Waipa. So it could actually be an advantage to our ratepayers if that's the way that the cost is split.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Any other questions other than that? Liz?
One quick one, sorry. Hey, are we able to submit this in person? Can we tick that little box and speak to it as part of a submission in person? Because we haven't done, I don't recall us ever doing that before, and it'd be really great to get in front of their council through their process and have our 10 minutes say.
Happy to do that.
I mean,
Good
I
point.
just think me, Susan and myself could go. I just think it'd be great to get around their table. I don't recall us doing that in the past, and
Totally.
Yeah, I'm more than comfortable to investigate that. Can we look into that, David?
Thank you for raising that. Thank you. Support.
Wonderful, awesome. With that said, we have a recommendation which I'm happy to move here, appearing on page 40 and 41. Roger will second that. I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Great. Thanks very much, David.
Thank you all.
Moving on then to our next item, which appears at tab 9 of in our agenda, and diligent. It is the local government electoral legislation in Māori wards and constituencies amendment bill. Good morning, Joe. The floor is yours.
Good morning. The paper that we've got in front of you today is in relation to the announcement that the coalition government have made that they'll be introducing a bill which we're expecting to see in May to reinstate the requirement for a poll for Māori wards. There are some transitional measures that what they're proposing to put in place for this election, which would involve councils either having to make a decision to revoke or rescind the Māori ward position if they introduced it after the changes that were made to the legislation to remove the requirement for a poll, or they are required to have a poll at the 2025 elections. We have an approximate estimate now of what those costs might be. There are a number of variables involved in that, but current estimate is that poll would cost in the vicinity of $50,000. That is obviously not budgeted for currently. We do understand that there is going to be, from the DIA, that there's going to be no chance for individual councils to make submissions on the bill. So what we have proposed in this report is that a letter is written to the Minister highlighting concerns with the introduction of this proposed bill and the implications on councils. So any questions?
Thanks very much, Joe. Any commentary? It's pretty well set out there on page 49 that the letter, points of the letter will it likely contain. I had a further thing that I wanted to add to it, and it isn't contained in the paper. And I guess this was something that was born out from a webinar that I attended with DIA recently on this matter, is that there is a sense that this proposal, this bill, goes beyond reverting back to the pre-2021 scheme, which really is just to resurrect the really should be just to resurrect the ability to create a petition, which would then lead to a binding poll. This actually goes a step further and forces a binding poll. So that's sort of another point, I think, to add in terms of that correspondence to the Minister. I feel it's an overstep in terms of even what I'd understood the bill was intended to do. So with that addition, any comments or questions in respect of the matter? Claire?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Susan. Yeah, I'm really disappointed that the coalition government has taken this stance as well. I didn't appreciate those points that you'd just covered actually, but I do really support the stance that LGNZ has taken, that, you know, if we're about local government, this should be a local decision. Yeah, and I'm disappointed that we went through quite a good process, I thought, when we set up the Māori ward, and I thought there was a good demonstration of support, well over 50%. I think that in Waipa, the Waipa residents' submissions was 73%, which is a clear majority. And it says 84, but that was including submissions from outside the district. Yeah. And so, we could avoid $50,000 worth of expense. And also, I did feel that it was quite divisive for our community as well. And look, having Dale Marie around our table, I have seen that as a massive positive step for us. So, I'm not looking forward to having to go through this process and really, what is it going to achieve? So I think it's a local government decision, so it should be made here at Waipa, at a local government level. Thanks.
I totally agree with you, Claire. And in terms of, in one sense, this government talks about localism and devolution of power and taking it back to the grassroots, and then you have this enormous overreach by way of this particular bill. The way I see it, you can't see it both ways. So, totally agree with your observations and yes, the perception that, or the view that LGNZ have taken on this matter. Any other comments or commentary to have? Monty.
I know, just fully support and happy to move.
Thank you, Monty.
Chair, do you want to add in your specific bit at the end there? Maybe just to tack on to C?
I can just add it in the letter. I don't think it needs to be necessarily. I mean, I write letters to the ministers regularly without getting approval as to how we write them. So I'm fairly certain I'm big enough to be able to do that myself.
You just second that motion, Madam Chair.
Okay, so you moved it, Monty?
I moved it and I had considered that question about whether it needed amendment. Decided it didn't. I thought you had flexibility. I was happy. That's why.
Unless the council feels so strongly they want that to be recorded by way of a recommendation. I'm comfortable that there's an understanding here that that's an appropriate addition to add to the letter. So I have Monty moving the recommendations as they currently sit. Philip was going to second that for me. I will put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Excellent. Thanks very much, Joe. The next item, Ahuaki. And although I have Vanessa written here, we don't have Vanessa, we have Kirsty instead. Or is Vanessa going to beam in for it with us?
Through you, Madam Chair, apologies from Vanessa, who is unwell, but I expect that she's online to respond to questions if needed.
Thanks, Kirsty.
So I'd like to request that the report be taken as read and just highlight a couple of points. As you're well aware, the timeframe for delivery of Ahuaki has changed several times, and we've endeavoured to be responsive to the change with the development of the long-term plan, progressing an enhanced annual plan. As part of that, in earlier discussions with you through the PCG and through a workshop in March, or a session in March, we have talked about exploring the possibility of decoupling the substantive strategy from the implementation plan. We took some advice from Ian Munro in regard to that. But as Vanessa and the team have said about doing that, that has raised a number of issues. And where we as staff and technical experts have landed is that that's not the best way for Waipa to be delivering our spatial plan. When we set about this project right at the beginning, it was about ensuring that we successfully deliver on our vision and our community outcomes, that we build connected communities, that we bring together our framework and an approach for all of our future planning, prioritisation, investment, project and service delivery. And I think if we were looking to decouple, then we would have high level words and not that connection to actually what's delivered on the ground. So that really goes against everything that we have aspired to achieve with Ahuaki, the engagement that we have had with our mana whenua and iwi partners and with stakeholders and our wider community. So you'll see in the report that we've explored 3 possible options, the first of those being a decoupling, the second and third relating to retaining the plan as one complete document comprising the strategy together with the implementation. The difference between those two options relates to timing for undertaking the special consultative process. Option 2 would involve us undertaking that process in September and October of this year in advance of the long-term plan. In essence, that engagement would constitute a further period of pre-engagement for the 25-34 long-term plan. Ahuaki obviously will be sufficiently developed to inform the development of the long-term plan as it gets underway now, but would then be approved prior to the preparation of a final or a draft budget and the special consultative procedure to follow. The third option would see us deliver that SCP in February and March alongside the long-term plan. We've connected with Lisa and considered, the community expectations, the storytelling, and how how we can be transparent to our community, how the community can make sense of what we've been doing. So option 2 is the recommended option that we present to you. Unfortunately, at the most recent PCG meeting, we weren't able to convene a meeting, and that we had only one elected member attend, no mana whenua representatives, and myself as the only exec member. However, we have connected with a number of you and have had feedback from elected members and exec team who are generally supportive of the proposed recommendation. Just a final point, we recently attended a JMA meeting with Waikato Tainui and received significantly positive feedback from Waikato Tainui representatives there relating to the way in which we've developed Ahuaki from the commencement of this project. So that was from Jackie Collier specifically, endorsed by other members of the governance group, but then a new member to that group was actually somebody who we had selected as part of the community group, who participated through the World Cafe workshops and shared with the governance group his experience in being there in the engine room as part of developing recommendations to present to elected members. So that was really positive. Option 2 provides us with an opportunity to further engage with mana whenua and iwi before we commence a special consultative procedure. And just, want to also acknowledge I think there was acknowledgement of the role of Dale Marie, who'd been involved in early Zui that we held prior to her becoming a member of the council, but it was acknowledged the value add in her role as the Māori ward councillor. So I'm happy to respond to any questions. Likewise, Vanessa is online, and collectively we can respond to any queries or clarification that might be required. Thank you.
Thanks, Kirsty. Great report and a really good summary of the options that sit before us there. So can I open the floor for questions in respect of this paper and the choices we have here in regards to the recommendation? No, deathly silent. Obviously, I take that as absolute overwhelming support for the proposition that we approve option 2. Excellent. I think Gary wants to have a quick word.
Sorry, Kirsty, you might want to also inform the council about the recent New Zealand Planning Institute Awards.
Thank you, Gary. So through the chair, I think I did communicate via email that we recently won the community award for our digital tools was a best practice award for Ahuaki. And we've recently been notified of another win, we're a finalist for a bronze, silver or gold award at the PRINZ Awards to be awarded later this month. So that was in relation to community relations and engagement. So that's for the entire process. So we're looking forward to finding out the result of that award also. Thank you.
No surprises to us though, right? I mean, in terms of that digital component, I've sort of seen a lot of commentary, even online, about it, and people have been really complimentary about how forward-thinking and groundbreaking it has been. So well done. No real surprise there though. And in terms of the principal, I don't believe it would be the first time that we would have been up for one of those. But anyway, I digress. Any questions? Well, I've got a mover, and Claire was happy to move that, and Monty will second it. Or question, Monty?
No, I'll second it because I was 30% at that meeting. They'd closed the meeting before I got online. So I'll second it. That's my contribution.
Oh, thanks, Monty. I'll put the motion then as it appears on pages 54 and 55, receiving Vanessa's report and approving option 2 contained in that report. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Thanks so much, Kirsty. And thank you, Vanessa, and look after yourself.
Madam Chair,
Hello.
I should have expressed a conflict of interest in the next item because a couple of years ago, I was part of the discussions on the RDA in terms of its lease. So I will withdraw from any comment on that item.
And I was going to do the same with the Kayak Club. I'll just stay silent on that.
Oh,
matter.
okay, okay.
It's already been discussed at finance.
Yeah, and when we're at finance and corporate, the two of you declared those conflicts at that time too, correct? Excellent. Okay, well, thank you for that. We can add those belatedly. Thank you very much for that. So moving on then to this item, it's obviously a Reserve Act matter, and we have before us, or it's supposed to be David Varco, but it's not. It's hello, Angela. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. So I'm obviously Angela McEwen from the property team.
Yeah.
David kindly presented the reports for me at the Finance and Corporate Committee last month for these 4 leases that we're discussing today. This is really a formality of the Reserves Act that we need to also seek the consent of the Minister, which is delegated to Council. So happy to take it as read and happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, thanks, Angela. Obviously, these are nothing new here for us. We dealt with these in our last Finance and Corporate meeting. Marcus, you're happy to move it on that basis. And Lou will second that, so that's the recommendation appearing on page 63 in respect of those 4 leases. I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Excellent.
Thank you
Thanks
very
very much, Angela. It's almost a world record for the shortest time in the hot seat. Great. All right. Moving on then to our next item on the agenda, which is a resolution to exclude the public before we break for morning tea. You'll see the reasons for that motion set out on page 134 of our agenda. I'm happy to move that from the chair, being comfortable with the reasons behind that. And Mike is happy to second that. I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against?